I am here today with editor of Wildscape Literary, and her name is Ophelia Monet, and she is a writer as well, so we'll cover a couple different areas during our talk. But just to throw it to Ophelia for a brief introduction, what's a little bit about your place as an editor these days? So it's a little bit of a new role for you, so say a little bit about that first.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, Aaron, for having me. I'm so honored to be here. I am the editor and founder of Wildscape Literary Journal, and this is my first big role as an editor. I've been writing for a while, but I wanted to, start something fresh and new. So me and partially kind of my husband started Wildscape. He helps a little bit on the side. And yeah, it's been a journey. We started back in August, I believe, late August 2024. So pretty recently. Just released our first issue, which Aaron is a part of. And yeah, it's been quite the journey so far.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to acknowledge that. Yeah, I did appear in the first issue as well. So a little bit of a bias, but actually we had not really touched base previous to that. So it was really an organic thing from my perspective.
Yeah.
To see the call either on Instagram or wherever, who knows, where I saw a call for work from Wildscape, and I submitted. And thankfully got accepted. So it was kind of a neat, like I said, kind of an organic thing, because then, go to figure, like, oh, you're a writer, and then created a lit mag, an online lit mag, and I'm saying, oh, there's some overlap here between us. So it was good to connect in that way. Maybe we can touch a little bit on your side as a writer. I always like to ask near the beginning, like, are there maybe formative experiences in your life as a writer or creative person? Like, how did your creative path get to being a writer, a poet, before even being an editor?
Yeah, so my journey as a writer, I feel like, was a major roller coaster, and it was a roller coaster quickly. So I feel like most writers, I started writing when I was really young, back when we had Microsoft Notepad on our desktop computers at home, writing just short stories and fairy tales and things like that. And then there was a really long period of time where I didn't really write at all. School got in the way, and I college full time, worked full time. I was a college athlete, so I didn't really have time then to write much as well either. And then my last semester of undergrad, my mom passed away really suddenly. And it was years after that, I was going through some of her old boxes and things, just random stuff. And this was in probably at this point, 2021, 2022. And I found some of her old journals, and I found in the journals that she was a poet, and she had art in there too. And I knew that she was an artist, but I didn't really know that she wrote poetry at all. I knew that she wrote sometimes, but not poetry. And in going through all this stuff and going down the rabbit hole of, all that, I discovered that she was a published poet under a pen name. And so I, dabbled a little bit. I was like, well, maybe I'll try my hand at this. And so, when you first start writing, you're a writer, Aaron. It is terrifying to share that with people. Your most vulnerable innermost thoughts, and your perspectives of how things are shaping around you in the world. It's really intimidating to share that with people. So at first, I only shared it with my husband and a few close friends, and I got some good feedback. And I was like, maybe I'll start writing under a pen name. So I started my Instagram page and wrote under a pen name. Ophelia is a pen name. Monet is my true middle name. So I started doing that, sharing my work on there, and I was getting good feedback there too. And my husband was like, hey, why don't you start submitting some work to literary magazines? And that is terrifying at first. You're like, what do I do? Where do I start? How do I even begin to do that? But I figured it out, and I started submitting work, and you get rejection email, rejection email, rejection email. And then your first acceptance email is like, I don't know, this most magical experience. And I feel like whether it's your first acceptance or your 100th acceptance, it's just that feeling every time is like the best feeling, you know, it's so validating, you know, almost as if they're telling you like your stuff is worthy of other people seeing this. So yeah, I just started submitting more work and more work. And here we are. I
Yeah.
started submitting work only back in like March 2024. So it like hasn't even been a whole year yet. So I feel like this whole process has been really fast for me. But my husband has his MFA in creative writing. I've been surrounded by writing for a long time. Some of my closest friends are writers. So yeah, I think just it was a matter of putting myself out there and just taking that leap, which anyone in writing or art or any sort of creative process, you know, you got to make that leap eventually. And it's scary, but so very worth it.
Yeah. I think there is something to, there's tends to be like a lot hidden, maybe even like in going back to like kind of discovering that your mother even had published poems where
Yeah,
you
wild.
might not have even like were aware in that sense. And then, yourself, most writers I speak with, there's that phase where maybe it's early in life, maybe it's a little bit later, but there's that like germination phase of like, you're right, but you're not really showing anybody, and maybe you mention it, but it isn't a serious thing until either you have to show somebody or you choose to, or there's something kind of brings it out in the open a little bit. So
Yeah,
yeah, it is interesting. Like you said, you have this background and you're surrounded by it in certain ways, but it takes a little bit of extra push to get it out
yeah,
there in
for
a
sure.
publication sense to put it out there for submitting and things like that. So yeah, I mean, similar in some ways because yeah, I did it a little bit later where maybe I had some writing, but it was just kind of like, oh, it's yeah, like you said, it's in a file, it's saved.
Yeah, or in like the notes on
And
your phone
then
or whatever.
yeah, and then on and on it goes from there. Maybe a little bit of a left turn, but um, do you have other interests besides writing?
I have so many. I feel like the list is
Just to get
never
a
ending.
little like personal, background, and then we'll get into Wildscape a bit.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to share. I've spoken with you a little bit about this, but I am a full-time high school teacher. I work with kiddos with autism. That's my full-time job. I am a mother as well, so that I have a almost 3-year-old, which is wild. Um, so that's those two things take up a lot of my time. But I do have so many interests, like so many. I feel like there's not enough time in the day to, really like truly indulge myself in all of them. But one of my biggest interests is weather, which I feel like sounds silly in the realm of things that we're talking about right now. But since I was really young, my dad would take me storm chasing and like all that. And I almost went to school for meteorology or atmospheric science, but those fields are not particularly welcoming and kind to women. So, so here we are. But I still am a big part of that, that field. I am a storm chaser, believe it or not, like actually. Um, like I do actually chase tornadoes. It's so fun. I'm so excited for springtime to roll around here in the Midwest. And then I'm a certified storm spotter for the National Weather Service. And then I also help take data for the National Weather Service. So lots of stuff on that front. I obviously write. I am a big music and concert junkie. I love someone said to me last week, and I'm like laughing about this respectfully, but someone said, "You look like someone who listens to Taylor Swift." And I said, "That's hilarious because I love so many people who love Taylor Swift, but I am a death metal girly. So I listen to a lot of heavy rock. I go to a lot of like rock music festivals. And then I also recently learned how to crochet for no reason. So that's become like half of my personality at this point, too. So just so
Yeah,
many things. And I love to read books as well. I'm a big fantasy book reader. So yeah,
nice.
it's a little snapshot of me as a person.
Cool. Yeah. Well, a previous guest, September Heron, has a background in goth punk. So metal. I think
I love
we're
it.
kind of we're in the right kind of aesthetic, I think, musically.
I
If
think
just kind
so.
of reaching
Maybe.
out to people who are into cool musical genres, at least. So I feel
Yeah.
I feel good about that. And well, whatever. It's side note, but I live in Buffalo, and there's Taylor Swift is with Kansas City, so we don't have to get
Yeah.
into negativity or whatever, but it's there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then the reason I asked, I did see storm chasing as part of your bio, and that is a little bit different, just in the sense that I don't know if I'm like most people, but I know speaking for myself, like I'm going the opposite direction. I'm driving away. I'm
Most normal people
going.
do that. Yeah.
Let's go. Clouds are this way. I'm going that way. Um, that's an interesting. So do you have like photographs or is it videos and like is it just
Yeah.
collecting data and stuff like that?
So mostly the data side, but
Yeah.
so I've always like amateur chased, like not always, but a decade or so. It wasn't until this last calendar year that I like really got into it, with like analyzing current radar data and all that. So I do have some videos. I do have so many pictures. I haven't chased anything like crazy big yet. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I'm throwing names out there, like people know who I'm going to be talking about. But Reed Timmer is like a huge storm chaser. Like I'm not doing what he's doing, but I hope to maybe not get to that point, but like spend more time doing it and get more acclimated with it. So we're getting there.
Yeah. Nice. Well, be careful out there.
I will.
But yeah. Yeah, I think we can shift over to the wildscape side of things. So, what was the initial impulse to say, I like this writing thing and the submitting thing's pretty cool, but I want to like create a website to publish people. Was there a sudden thing? Was it something you had in the back of your mind for a while?
I will say it was probably something I had more in the back of my mind that kind of morphed into this actual idea. So I think what kind of kickstarted it is what I was talking about earlier, that like the feeling of getting an acceptance is just like magic. And when I was getting those at first, I was like, man, it'd be really cool to like give this feeling to people. And then, so in the back of my head, I think right off the bat, I was like, it'd be really cool to do that maybe someday. And another thing that kind of really pushed me towards that direction was, I didn't really, whether it's your first rejection or your thousandth rejection, they're gonna sting every time. But I think what kind of like adds to that sting sometimes is like the lack of, uh, I don't know, almost like the responses for rejections can be impersonable. And I know that editors are crazy busy, but I wanted to offer something where it was a bit more personalized, a bit more personable, and human. So I started to think, well, if I did this, I would hope that maybe I could like find the time or find the mental space to like offer more personalized responses, even if it's a rejection. And I'm not saying like full on feedback. I'm just like, hey, I actually really liked this specific piece. Keep writing. You're doing great. We'd love to see more for you in the future, or from you in the future, things like that. So I wanted to offer something that had that personalization to it, where you felt like you were getting a response from a human being. And the last thing that did it for me was I feel like a lot of people read and write in a way to escape the real world, but also more importantly, to have an outlet for what's going on in the real world. And I wanted to curate something, where people could read it and not escape the real world, but have something to make them feel deeply, whether that's, immense joy or rage or grief or anything on the spectrum of emotions. Because I feel that there's always so much happening around us. And lately, sometimes it feels like more bad than good. And it's so easy to become desensitized to everything and to just kind of numb out the emotion. And I'm guilty of that too. So I wanted something that would kind of put that bite back in the feeling, the spectrum of feeling. Something that would, you read a line and you'd be like, oh, wow, I'm actually reading this right now. This hit really hard. I really relate to this. I really feel this. So that was kind of like the final push for me was I found myself reading a lot and I was just like numbing out, and I wanted something that had purpose and value and emotion behind it. So at first I was like, I'm going to create this thing. And then I brought it up with my husband because, again, he's a writer and he's edited before. And he was like, okay, like, let's make an outline of what that would look like, the submission guidelines, the mission behind it all. And I had Wildscape, the name Wildscape, in the back of my mind for quite some time before that. I just kept like looping back to it because it felt like it encompassed what I wanted, that push of like frenzied emotion, but also grounding. So hence Wildscape.
Nice. I like the idea of, like you said, putting something out there, curating something where that interaction or in the engagement with, the writer, the creator's emotions, and kind of connecting with them in different ways. I mean, it could obviously take on different forms. And yeah, I think that has an appeal for a lot of people, and that is a reason why the subculture here of the lit mag poetry subculture, I think that carries some weight for people in the sense that they do have something to express, whether it's via personal experience and more direct experience, or more of these kind of processing different bigger life events or social events and things like that. So there's a lot of content to work with.
Oh yeah, very
That's
much so.
out there. I'm sure you're getting to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely appreciate that. And then I do, I like the design of the website, and I mentioned before we started recording that, the aesthetic seems to be pretty consistent and
Thank you.
easy to access, and just, as an editor and like website person, easy to use, easy to look at, easy to navigate. So, if you haven't checked out the Wildscape website yet, go for it. And it's easy to submit as well. So how would people submit? Just to cover that area. Currently do have open submissions.
Mm-hmm.
What's your kind of schedule for submissions look like?
Yeah, so right now we're open until February. Well, I guess by the time this comes out, that'll be irrelevant. But our plan is to do 4 issues a year. There are really only 8 weeks ish out of the year that we are not accepting submissions. So chances are, when you look, we're probably accepting submissions. So we are open for 10 weeks from like December 1st to February 15th, publication in mid-April, from March 1st to May 15th for publication in July, and then June 1st to August 15th for publication in October. And then again from, I think, is that all of them? May have been all of them.
Yeah.
No, yes.
Yeah.
And then September 1st to
Right.
November 15th for publication in January. So we're open a lot of the year. What was the other part of your question? I apologize.
Oh, I think we can just cover like what do you accept? Is it open to all genres? Some of the details like that for listeners who want to give it a go.
Yeah. So we're looking for poetry, flash fiction, flash creative nonfiction, and art. As for art, we accept and look at all mediums. So there was a piece for issue 1 that was a photograph of art that I deeply admired. So there's really no like strict boundaries in the art realm. We are very poetry heavy. We love short pieces, things that'll bite, something with a bite to it, that'll make you feel strongly. And then you can submit through, we have 2 ways, because I know that the process, again, can be intimidating. It can be anxiety inducing. So we have Duosuma is the main platform that we use. I know that Duosuma can be a little frustrating sometimes for people, but I have a big love for Duosuma and Duotrope, amazing resources, amazing platforms. But since I know some people struggle to use Duosuma, we also allow email submissions at wildscapelit@gmail.com. So you can choose either. We don't put one in front of the other. We put them in the order that we receive submissions on our little spreadsheet that we have. So yeah, there's no pressure to use Duosuma if you're not vibing with it.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely helpful. And yeah, deciding a little preference a little bit with shorter stuff, and in
Mhm.
terms of prose, like more flash prose, maybe I'm throwing out
Yeah,
maybe like
prose
a
is
thousand
totally
words,
fine.
kind of something like that.
Yeah, so for fiction and nonfiction, our cap is 1,500 words a piece.
Okay.
We'll do 2,000 and at an absolute max. We accept prose, we accept hybrid pieces too. So I know for our first issue, we did have a blackout erasure poem. So those are totally fine. We really don't have any really strict like boundaries
Right.
as to what is submitted. We want it all. We want the chaotic, we want the grounding, we want it all. And we really are just looking for something that will hit us in the gut, make us feel something. And I don't mean necessarily like make me so sad that I cry. I mean more having words in the right order that just kind of for a moment rewire the structure of your brain. You know, you're like, "Oh my gosh, like that I related to that more than I have in anything in a long time." Something like that. That's the bite we're looking for.
Do you have maybe favorite writers or writers in the sense of people who maybe have that quality that you find inspirational or connect with or have been influential, kind of your
Yeah.
go-tos? As it doesn't have to be poetry, but poetry or whatever else
Um,
you read.
you know, I get asked that question a lot. And as far as poetry goes, there are certainly writers that I love, but I find myself not gravitating towards a specific poet, more so specific poems. As far as like books and stuff, there are certainly writers that I just love with everything in my being because the way they write is almost poetic. Like Shay Earnshaw is probably one of my favorite authors of all time. And the way she writes is so stunning and I don't even know how to describe her. It's just she kind of like ropes you in, and pulls you into the book. And all of her stuff's really short. It's usually like magical realism. But if you've not read Shay Earnshaw, but you love poetry, she's amazing. I also love authors like Rebecca Ross. A River Enchanted is also extremely poetic and beautiful in the way she writes. So, yeah, I tend to not like overly gravitate to specific people, just specific styles, I would say. But there's certainly novel writers that I love who write in a poetic fashion.
Absolutely, yeah. So I know one of the novels like has got me hooked and has been a favorite ever since is Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson, and that one is for me one of like those poetic novels that I think
I'm about to like make a note
it's
of
just
that.
perfect. Yeah, it's one that I've recommended more than I can remember. Yeah, and I had this impulse the other day. I was picking out a book at the public library as I do on occasion, and one of my favorite novelists is Don DeLillo, and I've read lots of his books. He's got a lot of novels at this point, and it's just one of those reminders, like, oh yeah, it's time to read another Don DeLillo book, whether it's rereading one that I've read before, or he has a newer one or two that I haven't read yet. And yeah, for me, like the way he writes just kind of locks right into place, and it was like, yeah, that's why haven't
Yeah.
I just read this the whole time?
It's like your comfort author.
And yeah, I think just yeah, just the way you write says something there for me. Always have to get a couple of yeah, a couple of reading recommendations
I
in
know I'm
there
writing yours down too.
one way or another.
Yes.
It's a good transition, if you would, since you are a writer as well as an editor, kind of toggling back and forth between the two. You can read one of your published poems as a way
Yeah.
to share that, but also like take the opportunity to share a little bit, about the poem or where it was coming from creatively. Anything about the background you want to set up before or after you read the poem. Feel free to tack that on.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it before. So the one I'm gonna be reading is called Yes, No by well, and by me obviously, but Maudlin House is who published it back in August, I believe. And this is one of my more, heavy internalized poems. And I feel like sometimes I write more metaphorically than otherwise, but this one is pretty straightforward. When it's about when you're feeling any intense emotion, and how, you sometimes can, like I mentioned earlier, become numb, or desensitized to what's going on around you. So this specific piece is mostly nonfiction. Going to therapy after my mom passed, and just, the therapist asks, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And I'll say, good, good, I guess, like numb. And they're like, okay, well, you didn't say bad. So check that box. And just, the cycle of mental health and grief, and how we internalize it, and how it's perceived by others, including mental health professionals sometimes. So that's a little bit of the background. I don't write too much like this like really deep, heavy nonfiction style, but this is one that I hold near and dear to my heart, because although it was based on a time over 10 years ago, it feels a lot closer than that. So, do you want me to just go ahead and dive right in? All
Sounds
right.
good.
So, yeah. So this one's called Yes No. And I was right. Published in August 12th by Maudlin House. A comfortable couch welcomes me, the kind that you sink into, plush. She asks me how I've been feeling lately. Fine, I guess. Not bad. Numb, if nothing else. She says that's good. Is it? I would have thought numb is not good, but she's the professional, so I go with it. Her office emotional support chihuahua nudges my arm. He wears a sweater. His name is Poncho, and I love him. I rest my hand on his small head and pet him gently. He is great at his job. I make sure he knows this. She asks me if I've considered harming myself lately. No, I just don't feel much of anything, if I'm being honest. She says, that's good news. I'm starting to think she only listens for the yes or no in my response and filters out the rest. She guides me through a series of questions regarding the history of my traumas, asks if I've been using the strategies we've been practicing. Yes, I have. Asks if they're working, I guess, and sends me on my way. I still feel numb. I pull out my phone and ask Reddit if this is normal, and drive home to where my trauma rests in the walls, soaks in the carpet, floats like dust in the air of every room. Yeah, it's a more somber one, but one I hold very near and dear to my heart. So
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
yeah, of course.
Like you said, it has that prose sensibility, which I do
Yeah.
find appealing in poetry, and I often maybe struggle. Part of why I find it appealing is because I struggle with that at times, and it veers a little bit too abstract.
I think
So
that's
with a
why I don't
poem
write
like
that way
that,
very often either. Is I feel the same. It's hard sometimes.
yeah, but it comes across very kind of naturally. So
Thank
well
you.
done.
I would like to point out that her emotional support chihuahua was in fact named Poncho. That is all factual. He was the best.
Well, I think it's probably a good place to leave it after reading the poem. So thanks once again. We'll plug Wildscape and how to submit when this comes out. We'll be in one of those submission windows. So if you're hearing this, you can submit right now, which is nice, and then that'll be for an upcoming issue. So Ophelia, thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Aaron.